Hello, and welcome to Lyla's Lullabies, where we spend time exploring with Lyla, a traveler who wanders the world at her own pace, while sharing her most enriching and restorative moments with you. In tonight's story, we'll follow Lyla as she explores the beautiful Turkish city of Antalya. There's nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to remember. Just settle in, get comfortable, and let yourself go. We're so glad you're here. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. The October morning in Antalya was warm, but not overwhelming, the summer heat having given way to something gentler. Lyla walked from her hotel through streets lined with palm trees and orange trees, heavy with fruit, following the directions to the meeting point near Hadrian's Gate. The Mediterranean sparkled in the distance, visible between buildings, and the air carried the scent of the sea mixed with the sweet smell of jasmine from gardens hidden behind stone walls. She found the tour group gathering near the ancient Roman gate, its 3 arches standing proudly despite nearly 2,000 years of weather and history. A minibus was parked nearby, and a man with a warm smile and a clipboard was checking names off a list. Good morning. Welcome. Are you here for the Antalya Historic Tour? Yes, I'm Lyla. Excellent. I am Mehmet, your guide today. Please, meet the others while we wait for our last 2 people. Lyla turned to find 4 people already waiting. An older gentleman with wire-rimmed glasses and a lightweight linen jacket stepped forward first. Charles, he said in a refined British accent, from London. I taught classical history for 40 years, and Turkey has been on my retirement travel list for far too long. A woman about Lyla's age with auburn hair, pulled into a loose bun, smiled warmly. I'm Bridget from Dublin. I'm a librarian, and I've always been fascinated by the ancient Mediterranean world. Finally saved up enough to see it in person. Next to her stood a younger couple, perhaps in their late 20s. The woman spoke first. We're Camilla and Raphael from Sao Paulo. We're both architects, so we're especially excited about the Roman and Ottoman buildings. And we just got our first big project approved back home, Raphael added, grinning. So this is partly celebration, partly research. The last member of the group was a woman with silver-streaked black hair and paint-stained fingers, wearing multiple rings. Lyla, she said. Originally from Beirut, but I've lived in Montreal for 20 years now. I'm a painter, and I'm working on a series about Mediterranean port cities. Antalya is my 3rd stop. Just then, 2 more people hurried up. A mother and her adult daughter, both slightly out of breath. So sorry, the younger woman said. We got lost in the old town. Those streets are a maze. No problem at all, Mehmet assured them. You are right on time. And you are? I'm Sophie, and this is my mom, Helen. We're from Sydney. Mum's never been to Turkey, and I studied here for a semester in university, so I'm playing tour guide. Well, co-tour guide with you, I suppose. Perfect combination, Mehmet said with a laugh. Now we are complete. Please, everyone into the bus. We will start with Kaleiçi, the old town, and then visit some ancient sites outside the city. By lunchtime, I will have you hungry, and I know just the place. They all climbed into the comfortable minibus, and Lyla found herself sitting next to Charles, with Bridget and Lyla across the aisle. As Mehmet started the engine and pulled into traffic, he began speaking. Antalya is a very old city, founded in the 2nd century BC by a king of Pergamon. But humans have lived in this area for much, much longer. We sit at the crossroads of civilizations: Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Seljuk, Ottoman. Each one left their mark, and today you will see layers of history, one built upon another. He drove them through modern Antalya first, pointing out the way the city had grown. 2 million people live here now, most of them in these newer areas. But the heart, the old heart, that is where we are going. They parked near the edge of Kaleiçi, the historic old town, and everyone climbed out. The streets here were narrow and cobbled, lined with Ottoman-era houses that had been restored and converted into boutique hotels, restaurants, and shops. The walls were painted in warm colors: cream, ochre, terracotta, and wooden balconies jutted out from upper floors, some draped with bougainvillea in brilliant purple and pink. This area nearly fell into ruin in the 1970s, Mehmet explained as they walked. Many buildings were abandoned, crumbling. But the city decided to save it, and now you see the result. It's beautiful, yes, but also it keeps our history alive. They walked through the winding streets, Mehmet pointing out details. The way Ottoman houses were designed to keep cool in summer, the old fountains where people once gathered for water and conversation, the tiny mosques tucked between buildings. They emerged at the old harbor, and Lyla felt her breath catch. The marina was nestled in a natural bay, surrounded on 3 sides by steep cliffs covered in greenery. Traditional wooden boats, gulets with their distinctive broad beams and twin masts, were moored alongside modern yachts. The water was a deep blue-green, incredibly clear, and palm trees lined the waterfront promenade. This harbor has been used for more than 2,000 years, Mehmet said. Roman ships, Byzantine traders, Ottoman vessels, all came here. Now mostly tourists and fishing boats, but the harbor remains. Charles was already taking photographs, his historian's eye picking out details. Camilla and Raphael were sketching quickly in small notebooks they'd brought, capturing the lines of the boats and the architecture. Lyla stood very still, just looking, her artist's eye absorbing colors and light. They walked along the harbor, and Mehmet stopped at a cafe with tables overlooking the water. A short break, and Turkish tea for everyone. You cannot visit Turkey without proper K. They sat at a large table, and soon a waiter appeared with a tray full of small tulip-shaped glasses filled with dark red tea. Lyla took one and sipped carefully. It was hot and strong, with a slightly astringent flavor that was pleasant and refreshing. "So, Lyla," Bridget said, "what are you looking for when you paint these port cities?" "The relationship between people and water," Lyla answered thoughtfully. "How the sea shapes the way people live, the buildings they make, the rhythm of their days. Each port is different, but they all share something. This sense of being a threshold, a place between land and sea, between here and elsewhere." "That's beautiful," Sophie said. "I never thought about it that way." Helen, her mother, was watching the boats bobbing gently in their moorings. "It's so peaceful here. I expected Turkey to be more, I don't know, hectic, but this feels timeless." "October is perfect time," Mehmet said. "Summer is very busy, very hot. October, we still have good weather, but fewer people. You can breathe, you can think." After their tea, they continued exploring Kaleiçi. Mehmet led them to Hadrian's Gate, which they'd seen from outside earlier. Now he took them through it, explaining its history. Built in 130 AD to honor Emperor Hadrian's visit to the city. See how it has 3 arches? The central one is larger. That was for important people, for ceremonies. The side arches were for everyday traffic. Charles ran his hand along the ancient stone, worn smooth by nearly 2 millennia of weather and touch. "It's in remarkable condition," he said. "Many Roman structures this old are barely standing." "We took good care of it," Mehmet said proudly. "Even when the city walls around it were torn down, this gate remained. It's a symbol of Antalya." They walked through the gate, and Mehmet checked his watch. "Now we drive to Perge, an ancient city, very well preserved. You will see what a Roman city really looked like." Back in the minibus, they drove out of Antalya into the countryside. The landscape was Mediterranean, pine trees, olive groves, and in the distance, the Taurus Mountains rising dramatically. Mehmet pointed out a Roman aqueduct running along a hillside, its arches still standing after all these centuries. "These aqueducts brought water to the cities," he explained. "Roman engineering, still impressive today. Some are still functional, not for drinking water anymore, but they still carry water." After about 20 minutes, they arrived at Perge. The ancient city spread out before them, its ruins extensive and remarkably well preserved. They walked through the entrance, and immediately Lyla felt transported back in time. The main street, the colonnaded way, stretched before them, lined with the stumps of marble columns. Mehmet explained that these columns once supported a covered walkway on each side, providing shade for shoppers and merchants. The street itself still showed the deep ruts worn by chariot wheels. "This street was the heart of the city," Mehmet said. "Imagine it as it was. Columns holding up roofs, shops on either side selling everything from food to jewelry, water channels running down the center to keep everything clean and cool, people walking, talking, conducting business." They walked slowly down the ancient street, and Lyla tried to visualize it. She could almost hear the echo of voices, the clatter of cartwheels on stone, the calls of merchants advertising their wares. Raphael was crouching down, examining the ancient pavement. "Look at the engineering," he said to Camilla. "See how slightly curved the street is? That's for drainage." Every detail was thought through. They explored the Roman baths, their rooms still clearly defined, the frigidarium for cold baths, the tepidarium for warm, the caldarium for hot. Mehmet explained the underfloor heating system, showing them the spaces beneath where hot air would circulate. The theater was next, a massive semicircle cut into the hillside, its rows of stone seats rising steeply. Charles climbed to the top row and sat down, looking out over what would have been the stage and beyond to the ruins of the city. "They could fit 12,000 people here," Mehmet called up to him. "Can you imagine? 12,000 people watching plays, listening to music, hearing speeches." Sophie stood at the center of where the stage would have been and spoke in a normal voice. "Testing the acoustics." Her voice carried perfectly, reaching every corner of the theater. Everyone clapped, delighted by the ancient engineering that still worked flawlessly. They spent over an hour exploring Perge, wandering through the marketplace, examining the stadium where chariot races once thrilled crowds, looking at carved stones that showed scenes from daily life and mythology. Lyla took dozens of photographs, muttering about light and shadow. Bridget sat on a stone, writing detailed notes in a small journal. Eventually, Mehmet gathered them together. "I think you are ready for lunch now, yes? I'm taking you to a place I know. Traditional Turkish food. Family-owned, very good." They drove to a restaurant on the outskirts of a small town, its terrace shaded by a massive fig tree. The owner greeted Mehmet like an old friend, and they had a brief conversation in Turkish before the owner gestured welcomingly to the group.
Hoş geldiniz. Buyurun, buyurun.
He says, "Welcome, please come in," Mehmet translated. They were seated at a long table on the terrace, and soon food began arriving. There was ezmi, a spicy tomato and pepper spread, served with warm flatbread. Stuffed grape leaves filled with rice and herbs. Grilled kofte, spiced meatballs, and chicken sis kebab. Shepherd's salad with tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. Yogurt with garlic and mint. And a large platter of pilaf with almonds and raisins. "Please help yourselves," Mehmet encouraged. "This is how we eat in Turkey. Everyone shares, everyone tries everything." The food was delicious, each dish simple but perfectly seasoned. The bread was still warm from the oven, and Lyla spread ezmi on a piece, savoring the combination of spice and freshness. The kebabs were tender and smoky, the salad crisp and bright. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Charles told stories about archaeological digs he'd visited in his youth. Helen described growing up in Sydney and how different it felt to be in a place with such ancient history. Camilla and Raphael talked about their architectural project, a community center in Sao Paulo, and how seeing Roman engineering was giving them ideas. "It's the attention to human scale," Camilla said. "Everything here is built for people. The shaded streets, the public spaces, the way buildings relate to each other. We've lost some of that in modern architecture." After lunch, they were served strong Turkish coffee in small cups, thick and sweet. The owner brought out a plate of baklava, layers of filo pastry with pistachios, soaked in honey, and Lyla took a small piece. It was incredibly sweet and rich, the perfect ending to the meal. "Now," Mehmet said as they finished their coffee, "we have one more stop. Aspendos, to see perhaps the best preserved Roman theater in the world." They drove through rolling countryside, passing through small villages where old men sat outside cafes playing backgammon, where women in headscarves carried shopping bags, where children played in dusty yards. The landscape was peaceful, touched with the golden light of afternoon. Aspendos appeared suddenly, a massive theater built into the side of a hill. As they approached, Lyla was struck by how complete it looked, how intact. Unlike most Roman ruins, this theater still had its full facade, its stage building rising tall and impressive. "This was built around 155 AD, Mehmet explained as they entered. "And it's so well preserved because the Seljuks used it as a caravanserai, an inn for travelers, in the medieval period. So they maintained it, kept it functional. Lucky for us." The theater could hold 15,000 people, and its acoustics were legendary. Mehmet led them to the top row of seats, then went down to the stage. He dropped a coin, and the sound carried perfectly to where they sat, clear as if he were standing next to them. Unbelievable, Raphael breathed. They explored the theater, sitting in different sections to experience the acoustics, walking on the ancient stage, examining the remaining decorations on the facade. Sophie explained to her mother how Roman theaters were built, and Helen listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions. Bridget sat alone in one section, her eyes closed, and Lyla wondered if she was imagining the theater as it once was, filled with people, alive with music and drama, part of a living city rather than a silent ruin. As the afternoon moved toward evening, Mehmet led them back to the minibus. One more stop before we return to Antalya, a place for watching the sunset. He drove them to Duden waterfalls, where the Duden River plunged over a cliff directly into the Mediterranean Sea. They parked and walked down to a viewing area, arriving just as the sun was beginning to lower toward the horizon. The waterfall was beautiful, the water white and foaming as it fell, creating rainbows in the spray. The sound was constant and soothing, and the mist cooled the air. They stood at the railing, watching the water fall into the turquoise sea below. As the sun descended, the light turned golden, then amber, painting the water and the cliffs in warm tones. The waterfall seemed to glow, and the sea became a mirror of copper and gold. No one spoke much. They just watched, each person absorbed in the beauty of the moment. Helen slipped her hand into Sophie's, and they stood together, mother and daughter, watching the sun touch the horizon. Charles had put away his camera and was simply observing, his historian's mind perhaps quiet for once. Layla's artist eyes were capturing colors and light, storing them away for future paintings. As the sun finally disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky streaked with orange and purple, Mehmet spoke softly. In Turkey we have a saying, Güneş batarken, kalpler açılır. When the sun sets, hearts open. I hope today has opened your hearts to Antalya, to Turkey, to our history and our beauty. It absolutely has, Bridget said quietly, and the others murmured their agreement. They returned to the minibus as twilight settled over the landscape. The drive back to Antalya was peaceful, everyone tired in a satisfied way. Mehmet played quiet instrumental music, a Turkish oud mixed with gentle percussion, and Lyla watched the darkening countryside pass by the window. When they reached Kaleiçi, Mehmet parked near where they'd started. Thank you all for a wonderful day. You have been excellent travelers, curious, respectful, appreciative. I hope you will explore more of Antalya on your own, and that you will take good memories home with you. The group thanked him warmly, several people embracing him in the Turkish way. They exchanged email addresses and promised to share photographs. Charles shook Mehmet's hand formally, but with obvious emotion. You've brought history alive for me today, thank you. As the group dispersed, Lyla decided to walk through Kaleiçi one more time before returning to her hotel. The old town was lovely in the evening, lights beginning to glow in restaurant windows, the narrow streets quieter now. She wandered without direction, letting her feet choose the path. She passed a small mosque, where she could hear evening prayers being sung, the sound beautiful and haunting. She found a tiny square with a fountain, where an elderly couple sat on a bench, talking quietly. She walked along the ancient city wall, running her hand over stones that had stood for centuries. Eventually, she found herself back at the old harbor. It was more crowded now, the restaurants along the waterfront full of diners, music drifting across the water. The boats were lit up, their lights reflecting on the dark water. Above, stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue sky. Lyla found a cafe with tables overlooking the harbor, and ordered kay and a portion of borek, a savory pastry filled with cheese and herbs. The tea arrived in its traditional tulip glass, and she wrapped her hands around it, enjoying the warmth. The borek was flaky and delicious, the cheese slightly salty, the herbs adding brightness. She ate slowly, watching the harbor. A fisherman was working on his boat, coiling ropes and checking nets. A couple walked past, holding hands. From somewhere came the sound of laughter. As she sipped her tea, Lyla thought about the day, the layers of history in Kaleiçi, the ancient streets of Perge, the perfect acoustics of Aspendos, the waterfall glowing in the sunset. She thought about Mehmet's saying about hearts opening, and she felt that it was true. Something about being in a place with such depth of history, such continuity of human presence, did open something inside her. She finished her tea and paid, then walked slowly back toward her hotel. The evening air was mild and pleasant, carrying the scent of the sea and night-blooming flowers. The streets of the old town were magical at night, the stone walls golden in the lamplight, shadows creating mysterious corners and inviting doorways. At her hotel, she went up to her room and opened the window. She could hear the sounds of the city, distant music, conversations, the occasional call of a night bird. She sat by the window, looking out over the rooftops of Kaleiçi, toward where the sea lay dark and vast under the stars. Tomorrow she might visit one of the beaches Mehmet had mentioned, or explore the archaeological museum, or simply wander more of the old town. But that was tomorrow. For now she was content to sit here, feeling the cool night air on her face, listening to the night sounds of this ancient city. She thought about all the people who had sat in windows like this over the centuries. Romans and Byzantines, Seljuks and Ottomans, travelers and locals, each one looking out at their own version of Antalya, each one part of the continuing story of this place where the mountains met the sea. The lights of the city spread below her, and beyond them the Mediterranean lay dark and eternal. Lyla sat peacefully by her window, feeling connected to the long thread of human history, grateful to be one small part of the endless story of people living, building, creating, and passing through this beautiful corner of the world. Somewhere in the distance she could hear the call to prayer from a mosque, the sound carrying across the rooftops and mixing with the night breeze. It was a sound that had been heard in this city for centuries, marking time, calling people to reflection, reminding them of something larger than themselves. Lyla leaned back in her chair, her eyes resting on the stars that were growing brighter as the night deepened. The air was filled with a mingled sense of the sea and jasmine, and she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, the kind that comes from spending a day well, from seeing beautiful things, from connecting with history and with fellow travelers, from simply being present in a remarkable place. She sat there for a long time, not thinking about anything in particular, just being, breathing, existing in this moment of perfect calm under the Turkish stars.